Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Genius Scan, Backblaze, and Monday.com. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know what? It is anniversary week, at least in the world of Club MacStories, because 4 years ago, you launched Club MacStories. There's probably an awful lot of people listening to this who are familiar with Club MacStories, but for the people who aren't, why don't you give me a quick rundown of exactly what it is and how it got started?
Sure. So the club is a way for us to offer extra content to paying members on a weekly basis. At a high level, it consists of 2 newsletters and a podcast. So we do Mac Stories Weekly, which comes out every Friday, and it contains a bunch of columns and for example, we have collections of apps or extra stories that we do not publish on the regular website. We have tips and tricks. We have featured home screens and interviews, and I also use the newsletter to share more advanced shortcuts that I build and share with readers and members. Or, for example, this summer, I've been releasing previews of shortcuts that I will be sharing publicly in the iOS 13 review. But if you're a Club MacStories member, you've been able to use some of them for like a month at this point. So that's nice. We also do the monthly log, which is a monthly newsletter with extra articles that we also do not publish on MacStories. And finally, we do MacStories Unplugged, which is a monthly podcast where you and I, or sometimes you and Ryan, we get together and we talk about the behind the scenes of MacStories and what's going on, what we're working on, and all that stuff. The club is really was intended as a way for us 4 years ago to diversify, to find a new revenue source at a time when a lot of people were concerned about the future of independent media. And we believed, Graham Spencer used to work for us at MacStories. We thought that in order to continue operating MacStories as an indie business, we should have found a way to offer content to our most loyal readers. And sure enough, that plan, although it required a lot of work, it played out very well over the years. And the club allows us to continue. It allows us to do 2 things, really, which is sort of a virtual cycle in a way. It allows us to continue operating MacStories as an independent business. We're not owned by anybody. All the decisions are ours to make. But also, it lets us continue expanding MacStories because of the revenue afforded by the club allows us to try and think of new ideas, new articles, new guest writers to feature on MacStories. And at the same time, it's also a way for us to share the more niche or advanced, shortcuts, for example, behind the scenes, making of all of these perks that are better suited for the folks who really like MacStories and want to get more out of it. So that would be my 2-minute description of the club.
Right. And, there's always so much that we can write about that we can't get to with all of our in-depth reviews. So it's another outlet for us to highlight for people the apps that we like a lot that we just can't always get to. And so, we'll have things like app debuts, which are usually relatively short highlights of apps that have caught our eye and why we like them. So that's really fun to do every week in MacStories Weekly. So the club was started on September 14th in 2015. That's only a couple of months before you and I started working together. And since then, every year on the anniversary, we've done something special to thank our members. And this year is, of course, no different. We've got deals on some of our very favorite apps and services for all the club members that are exclusive to the club members for a 2-week span. And that just started as we record this. And it'll still be going on for another 10 days or so when you're listening to this, if you listen to the show right when it comes out. In any event, There are over 30 developers who are participating, and I have to stop them for a moment and just thank them because they do a great job in kind of stepping up and helping us out with this. But 30 developers and something like 52 apps, it's really pretty amazing, apps and services together. And if you add up all the potential savings, if you went just nuts and got all 52 apps and services, you could save, upwards to close to $600. So it's a really big deal for club members. And of course, we hope it'll attract new club members as well. On top of that, the whole month of September, really, we do special things for club members. Federico's iOS 13 review, which you've heard a lot about before, is coming out very soon, and we will have an ebook just for club members for that. We're going to have a second ebook this year, which collects all the stories that I and Ryan and Alex and Stephen Aquino, all the people who have done extra previews of iOS 13 features that are coming in the fall. We're going to collect all those up and make them into a separate ebook, which will come out at the same time. And then on top of that, Federico's going to do his usual making of the review. Brian King, who's an animator and does a lot of the fancy graphics that we do alongside Federico's review, he's going to do kind of a making of the things that he does to create that. And Federico's got a whole bunch more shortcuts, advanced ones that are just for the club members, and that'll show up in weekly. And on top of that, we're doing something we've never done, which is wallpapers. And these things are gorgeous. I have gotten a sneak peek. I'm actually running some of them already, and they look fantastic. So we're really excited to release those to people. And we're going to do extra MacStories Unplugged episodes too, to really dig in deep with the review and also talk about apps and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a crazy busy, but also really cool month for club members.
Yeah, and looking ahead, later in September, I'm also working on, late in September and in early October, I guess, I'm also working on a bunch of surprises that I haven't announced yet. I think John knows what I've been working on. There's more shortcuts that I would like to share. There's something entirely new that we're going to release on MacStories, and that club members will have better and cheaper access to. You should look forward to that because I think it's going to be pretty awesome. But yeah, essentially, this time for the club anniversary, we've gone all in with the idea of offering perks and exclusive content to members. So this is the biggest anniversary month we've ever done. We've been doing this since the club turned 1 in 2016, and every year we do more. I cannot even begin to imagine what we're gonna do for the 5th anniversary next year. So I'm just gonna say that if you're new to Club MacStories, we will love it if you check it out, even if for just a month. You get full access to everything we've ever done and everything we've ever shared, all the ebooks, all the newsletters, 4 years worth of content if only you sign up for a month. And then if you like it, you can stay subscribed. And if you haven't checked out the club in a while, I think now is a great time to jump back in, especially because of all the review related material that we're going to share and all the iOS 13 content that we're working on. So this is something that I've been working on on the side during the whole summer to put together this list of perks, and everything's coming together. So I'm excited to finally release something in the very near future at this point, I guess.
All right, that sounds great. I'm really looking forward to seeing it all out there too, because we've been kind of talking about this all summer long, and it's fun to finally get it out to the club members. Federico, I want to do just a tiny bit of follow up about Apple Mail, because I set up some smart mailboxes in Apple Mail on my Mac, and they just disappeared. There's a bug.
Oh, okay.
It's not a very happy story. I mean, what I decided to do is, when we get test flight emails, I actually like getting the test flight emails. I don't turn those off because first of all, the test flight app is so slow that it's
my God.
It drives me crazy. And if I want to see release notes, sometimes it's easier just to search Apple Mail and find the email that has the list of new features in it than it is to actually use test flight. So what I do is I already had a smart mailbox that was done, really it was done through a rule with SaneBox that collects all the test flight stuff. And the problem with that was that if I got an invitation to a new test flight, it tended to get buried, especially this time of year when people are updating their apps really frequently. We get a ton of test flight email, And those invitations could very easily get lost amongst the other things, and I might archive them or delete them and then never install the app. So I wanted to have a smart mailbox that just looked for the text that's unique to the invitations and separated that out into a smart mailbox. And it worked for like 2 minutes, and then it just disappeared. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that bug goes away, and I can do that because that would be really handy to have. The other thing, and maybe I mentioned this on the episode, but VIPs seem to be totally broken for me because there are people in there that shouldn't be, and when I try to take them out, they just pop back in like 2 minutes later, and I haven't been able to either add someone or take someone out without it going back to this current state that it's in, and it's been driving me a little nuts, but I've just decided to kind of put it to the side and worry about it after we've got kind of the final releases of all of the OSs in the fall.
I'm very sorry for your loss, John.
Yes. Well, here I am trying to be productive and organized and clean up the clutter, but I can't. So go back to my old ways, I guess. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Genius Scan. Genius Scan is just like a scanner, but in your pocket. Have you ever needed to scan a document while you're not at home? Genius Scan is exactly what you need for that very situation. All you have to do is put the document in front of your device's camera, and Genius Scan takes care of automatically recognizing the paper against its background, cropping it, and cleaning it up. So what you get at the end is a perfect, clean, crisp, legible scan every single time. Multiple pages are automatically gathered into a single PDF document, making them super easy to share and to archive. The app is regularly featured by Apple on the App Store and has an average star rating of 4.9. Genius Scan has been continuously updated and improved by 2010, and that's continuing because this fall it'll be updated with new features, including dark mode, which will be out as soon as iOS 13 is available. Genius Scan is great for all kinds of users. Students can use it to scan their notes, doctors, prescriptions, pilots can use it with their flight plans, and salespeople can use it to scan contracts. It handles all of that and a whole lot more. Genius Scan is also totally free and fully functional. There are additional features that you can unlock with an in-app purchase to do things like export to Dropbox and Google Drive in the background, OCR your scans, lock them with Touch ID, and PDF encryption and smart document naming, all for just $7.99. And there's also an optional subscription for their Genius Cloud service so you can back up and synchronize over the cloud. Genius Scan is doing a giveaway of 10 promo codes just for our listeners. Use the link in the show notes to enter for a chance to win. Be sure to go to the show notes too for a link to download a copy of Genius Scan today. Genius Scan, a scanner in your pocket. Our thanks to Genius Scan for their support of the show. All right, Federico, we should talk about our topic today because I wanted to talk to you about the share sheet because the share sheet is changing quite a bit in iOS 13. And you and I did a long time ago in episode 76, we did an episode about our favorite extensions. But I wanted to somewhat revisit that, but in the context of how things have changed for the share sheet. And I guess we should probably talk about what exactly is changing first before we dive into exactly how we're dealing with the changes ourselves.
Right. Well, I think there's 3 major changes in the share sheet in iOS 13. There's a new row for quickly sharing content with specific contacts or groups of contacts all at once. There's a new vertical list of actions separate from the horizontally scrollable row of share extensions. And third, there's a new section for app-specific extensions that are only available within the app you're currently using.
Right.
So the high-level overview would be that Apple sought to redesign the share sheet by making it clear what is a share type extension. So the things you scroll horizontally, those are extensions or shortcuts in the context of messages profile pictures to quickly share content with other people or with other apps. And the vertical list of actions, which are displayed as monochrome buttons, those are your what used to be called action extensions. They're now just called actions, and all your custom shortcuts. So the shortcuts that you create in the Shortcuts app. In iOS 13, the Shortcuts app is now built into the operating system. You no longer need to download shortcuts from the App Store. And as part of this promotion to a built-in app, you no longer have a separate run shortcut extension that you need to tap through to get to a list of all your ShareSheet compatible shortcuts. All of your shortcuts, at least the ones that you have selected as enabled in the ShareSheet, they are now top-level items in the vertical list of the ShareSheet. So there's one tab less, and all of your shortcuts live there. And I guess we can go through these three major changes, and then we can sort of share the actions and the apps that we use.
Yeah, I do want to, I guess, focus first on the shortcuts that are at the top, and these are not like shortcuts, app shortcuts, but the sharing with people and groups of people at the very top, because I find that to be very handy. And right now, I don't have any. I think that this is going to be open to third-party developers, but right now, all of my share suggestions are through Messages or AirDrop. It's showing me my Mac Mini, which I'm sitting in front of, as well as a bunch of people or groups of people that I have in Messages. Now, is that your understanding that third parties will be able to use that?
So my understanding is yes, they need to integrate with some SiriKit intents, and they need to perform some changes, to apply some changes to their SiriKit integration in iOS 13. But in theory, they should be able to show up in that row of contacts. So I expect apps like WhatsApp, for example, or Messenger, I believe they already integrate with SiriKit. And once they perform the necessary changes, they should appear in this row. But right now, it's limited to, during the beta process, I didn't have any WhatsApp or Facebook or any other beta of third-party messaging apps. Right now, it's limited to Messages, which has already been a fantastic enhancement for me.
Oh, it has, yeah.
It is exactly the way that I share things on iMessage. I've long argued that Apple should have offered something similar to, I think it used to be called Text Plus Plus or Message Plus Plus.
Oh, right,
we reviewed this on MacStories years ago. It was an app from Contrast, the makers of Launch Center Pro, and it was an extension that allowed you to share things quickly with iMessage threads, with iMessage groups. And this is now essentially built into the OS. And not only that, so you have individual buttons for individual contacts or specific groups that you have in the Messages app, but also the order of these contacts. And this is, in theory, also true for the share extensions living underneath these Messages buttons. They should be sorted intelligently by the system based on the Siri suggestions framework. In my experience, I haven't really noticed any meaningful sorting algorithm that just changes the order of these shortcuts depending on the app that I use or the content that I share. But this is, I guess, the kind of thing that gets better once the software update is public and it's not in beta anymore.
Yeah,
but I've been using these buttons a lot, and they simplify sharing on iMessage considerably.
They really do. I guess I would say, looking at who's in mine, it's roughly accurate, but I think probably the last person who messaged me was you, who said you were ready to record, and you're not at the front of the list. But the people, if I scroll all the way across, the people in groups in here are all people who I've contacted today in one way or another at some point during the course of the day. So it's pretty accurate so far. The one thing that it's really changed for me is that when we drop down to the second row and we talk about the share extensions, is that I have taken Messages out of that row because I realized I really don't need it, because we've got one. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different Messages suggestions at the very top row, and that's more than enough to handle most of my usual daily texting needs. So I've dropped Messages out of the share extension row. And I mean, it's still available if I want to go to the more button, but it's not at the front of it. So that's one way that it's indirectly affected that second row.
Mm-hmm. AirDrop sharing is also much improved in iOS 13. So you're going to see AirDrop in two places here. You will see a suggestion for the, I guess, the nearest AirDrop device. Right in the first row. So before the first contact suggestion, you will see an AirDrop icon for the nearest device that you can AirDrop things to. And in iOS 13, each device now uses a proper Apple product icon. So a Mac Mini actually looks like a Mac Mini. An iPhone has a picture of an iPhone and all of that.
Mine does not. Mine does not have that. Mine's just a blank white circle.
Well, I'm sorry.
I don't know what's
because
going on.
I'm running 13.1, if that matters.
So am I.
Well, I don't know. But so unlike iOS 12, so you now have a dedicated AirDrop share extension in the second row. And when you tap it, it actually opens a full screen AirDrop view that shows you all of your devices, as well as devices from other people nearby that you can AirDrop content to. So it's very nicely done. It's a bunch of circles, and it's very intuitive to use.
I have the picture when I use that button, so who knows what's going on. But I have no people to share it with because I have nobody home right now. I'm all by myself.
All the things you say today are sad, John.
I know they are. It must be that time of year. I don't know. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Backblaze, the unlimited cloud backup solution for Macs and PCs that starts at just $6 a month. No gimmicks and no add-ons. I've been using Backblaze for so long, I really don't remember how long it's been at this point. It's migrated with me through more than one Mac at this point. And what I love about it is that I have the peace of mind of knowing that my data is safe off-site. It's outside of my home. And if my house burns down or my computer gets stolen, whatever happens, my data is safe with Backblaze and I can get it back. Plus, if I'm outside the house and I need a file that I can't get to because I don't have my Mac with me, I can use their app on my iPhone and pull it right from there. It's a great solution for that too. On top of that, I have 2 kids in college, and when they left for school, I got them a Backblaze subscription because who knows, their laptops could be dropped, broken, stolen, whatever happens, and having it up in Backblaze is perfect for keeping it absolutely safe. Backblaze backs up documents, music, photos, videos, drawings, projects, every single thing that's important to you. You know, sometimes you need access to a file on the go too, as I mentioned, and that is perfect for using Backblaze because they have a great mobile app that gives you access to all of that data, no matter where you are in the world, just from your phone. I mean, it's amazing how much data that they've backed up. They have backed up 750 petabytes, and it's still growing. That's the equivalent of 750 million gigabytes. That's amazing. These guys really know their stuff. Back up your stuff today, guys. It's really important. This is not something you should put off. Go to backblaze.com/appstories for your fully featured 15-day free trial. And to let them know that you came from App Stories so they know that you heard about them here. Again, that URL, it's backblaze.com/appstories. Do it today. Thank you to Backblaze for saving us from countless data disasters and for supporting this show. Let's talk about our share extensions because, as I already said, I changed mine around a little bit because I got rid of messages. And, you know, you've got the AirDrop one that's kind of anchoring the row at the front end there. Then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more beyond that. And what I put in there are the things that I use the most, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, the very first one is a Linky because I like using Linky when we share stories that we've written on MacStories. Always use Linky, so I always keep that at the front. That's one of the ones I use the most. Then I also have reminders and notes after that.
Same.
Because I've been using reminders all summer long for my task manager, and that's just a great way to get URLs and stuff in there. And then I've got Slack. Now, Slack, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this in here. I'm giving Slack another shot because sometimes the Slack share extension is just broken and like you'll think that you've sent something to a channel on your Slack and it never shows up. So for the longest time, I just kind of put that one off the list, but I'm giving it another shot now to see if they fixed it. Then I've got Yoink, which is a great way to kind of park a little bit of data somewhere before I want to use it in another app. Dropbox, because unfortunately, we still don't have shared folders in files. So I'm going to continue to need to use Dropbox. So that's there. And then GIF wrapped, because when I'm in Tweetbot, I like to save a GIF every now and then. And GIF wrap's share extension lets you just, go from from sharing the link to the tweet, you go straight to the GIF wrapped icon, and it saves it straight to the app, which is a nice way to get a good, big, huge collection of GIFs.
Very nice. I feel like you have much more interesting share extensions than I do.
What are yours?
I mean, I also use Linky Notes or reminders. Those are must-haves. Also, I have messages for those times when I really don't know actually why messages is here.
See?
I should probably remove this one.
I just removed mine like 2 or 3 days ago because I realized that I was getting 99% of what I needed out of the top row.
I got Dropbox because sometimes I want to... No, actually, I also ought to remove Dropbox. See, doing this episode is helping my cleanup. I need to remove Dropbox because I prefer to use the Save to Dropbox action, which actually lets me navigate the folder structure. So messages and Dropbox are going away, but I do have Mail, that one I use when I want to share like a link with somebody or a photo. Usually I want to share like a link or a photo with Sylvia or my mom, stuff like that. And the Apple News extension, which will basically open the current article in Apple News if the website you're visiting in Safari has Apple News support.
Do you prefer reading in Apple News in that situation?
It depends. I think sometimes for websites that I know will have a nicer layout in Apple News or are just faster to use in Apple News, I'll use it, like The Verge or some other gaming websites. They have a nice, clean Apple News format-based view.
Yeah.
So I use that for a handful of websites. We should also mention 2 more things. First, when you tap on the More button in the share sheet all the way to the right of the share extensions, you have a new view for seeing more extensions, which are called the suggestions, as well as managing the ones that are pinned to the share sheet, which are called your favorites. So now you can also hide the suggestions from the from this screen by tapping an edit button, and that is why I disabled a bunch of them, like Slack or Trello or Messenger or Gmail. Oh, I also have the working copy one. The working copy share extension is the one that I use to share text files and upload them to our GitHub shared repositories. It's what I use all the time to update my drafts in GitHub. And the second thing I wanted to mention, in iOS 13, the share sheet has a header section, which in Safari, for example, it shows you the title of the page and the website icon, as well as an options button. And this button lets you tweak the format in which content is shared. So, for example, in Safari, you can share as a PDF, or you can share as a web archive, which is incredible. Apple now lets you create .web archive files in iOS, which are basically offline copies of the full web page that you can use offline because it's a full HTML and CSS. It's the best format for saving web pages for research purposes. And you can also say, and this is incredible, you can also save a PDF of the Safari Reader version of an article.
Yeah, I love that.
The clean view, with just the text and images of Safari Reader, you can now share as a PDF. But otherwise, there's an automatic option that will pick the best format depending on the share extension or action that you're sharing to. And this options menu is also available in Photos. In Photos is where you configure whether you want to export a photo with metadata or if you want to share an iCloud link to a photo. It's not clear yet whether developers can provide their own option screen in iOS 13, but I think they cannot for now. I think it's exclusive to Safari and Photos. But in any case, other apps offer a share sheet header as well. And it usually contains a preview of the item you're sharing via that small icon in the top left.
All right. I just refreshed Safari and my iPod Touch is showing up in the little in the little airdrop
Nice.
circles. So, I just wanted to, I wanted to add a little something positive to the conversation. The reason I asked you about Apple News was because I use Reader View more than anything else for those websites where I don't want to see a lot of the cruft. And so I don't use news a lot, although I have once in a while tried it. It's just, I don't know. I guess maybe I like using the dark mode that Reader offers, and that's why I go to that more often than I do with news. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Monday.com, the tool that simplifies the way teams work together. Not only can you manage work and deadlines, but you can create a culture of transparency so that everybody on your team works better together. There are so many things to love about Monday.com. First of all, it works great for teams of any size, everything from a couple of freelancers on up to an enormous team. It's also very easy to use. You can automate your workflows, build boards from scratch, or use a pre-made template. There are a whole bunch of them, and they look fantastic. You can also do things like directly upload files from your computer using Dropbox or Google Drive. And it helps keep you on track because you can create accountability by assigning tasks to owners. You'll never miss a deadline either with the My Week feature, a personal assistant for you and your whole team. You can even work on the go with the Monday.com mobile app. I've been using Monday.com a little bit to do things like get organized this fall for all the stuff we have going on Club MacStories and with my Mac review. I keep a Kanban style board of cards where I have all the moving pieces organized and I can rearrange them. It's just a super great way to keep organized during one of the busiest times of the year. Start your 14-day free trial by going to monday.com/appstories. Again, that URL is monday.com/appstories. Go there now and try it out. I think you'll love it. Our thanks to monday.com for their support of App Stories. All right, Federico, what should we talk about next? I mean, I guess, when you go to the More tab or the More button on the second row, you have that's where you have the ability to kind of move these share extensions up to your favorites. So that promotes them. And once they're promoted, you can drag and drop them into any order. And then it's the suggestion ones where you can turn them off, as you said, with a bunch of toggles. And there's a plus button if you want to add them to the favorites. I do kind of wish that there was some sort of order that you could bring to these suggestions, because they're not alphabetical. I'm trying to figure out what the arrangement is here. Maybe it's
they're based on what I mentioned on what the system thinks it's the best way to sort them.
All right.
Based on the content you're sharing.
Okay,
but it's not clear.
No,
exactly. It's machine learning, man. Nobody knows.
All right. It seems pretty random to me. I'd almost rather have it be alphabetical, but it's totally fine.
When something is random, just say that it's machine learning based, and you will look fancy and experienced.
Absolutely. The other aspect of the actions section, which is the vertical scrolling list at the bottom, that we didn't mention is that it's divided into sections, and so
yes.
The very top section are your favorites, and then below that, there are app-specific ones. For instance, Safari has things like Find on Page, Add Bookmark, Add to Favorites, and Add to Home Screen. And then below that are all of your other app-related ones, third-party app-related actions, as well as your shortcuts. And I kind of wish that the shortcuts were a fourth section, that somehow those were separated. I mean, we have our Storybot shortcut that we have for MacStories that we use with Slack, and it conveniently, you designed it. It has a little robot emoji on it, so it's the very first one of my shortcuts, and that kind of acts as a separator for me. But I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a visual distinction between these, or else I guess maybe that they would actually be interspersed with each other, because right now they're completely separate.
Well, I don't know about the fourth section, but I do wish that it was possible to reorder entire sections.
Right.
So, for example, I would like to have my app-specific actions at the very top, because they are
Mhm.
specific to the app that I'm using. And then maybe, I don't know, but I wish that it was possible. I think the idea of sections is very nice, especially because you now have a clean break between what is your favorite and what is everything else, essentially. But I wish that it was possible to also reorder sections. What you can now do, though, is you can now have better access to your most used actions, no matter if they are system wide actions shared by apps or shortcuts or app specific actions. And what is
Right.
even nicer is that the favorites that you set are system wide. So if you put a shortcut at the very top, it'll be at the very top in all instances of the share sheet in the vertical section. But if you put a favorite that belongs to an individual app, it will of course disappear when you're using other apps. So if for example, if I put add to home screen, which is a Safari specific action in my favorites list, it will not be displayed when I'm using Twitter. So there's even that dynamic aspect of you can have favorites for certain apps and you can have different favorites for another app, which I think is very nice. So you can sort of tailor the experience of using an app to your particular tastes and needs. But then, of course, the shortcuts, I guess, is the big change here in that all of your shortcuts can now be top level items. And
Right.
the approach that I'm using right now is the following. So I tend to be very judicious about the shortcuts that I want to include in the share sheet. You can do so in the Shortcuts app by selecting the types of content that a share sheet enabled shortcut should accept. So, for example, if you set a shortcut to receive images, it'll show up in photos, it'll show up in files, it'll not show up when you're sharing some text. So I try to be very careful with the amount of shortcuts that I enable for the share sheet because I don't want my list to grow too long. But also, I'm using a couple of, I call them shortcut menus. They are essentially launchers for groups of shortcuts. So, for example, my top level favorite is called extensions. That is a shortcut that has a menu that lets me pick other shortcuts. So it's a way to group shortcuts together through a choose from menu action. And when I tap it, I have quick access to my most used shortcuts, things like sharing a link to with you guys on Slack or saving a music release for later to listen to, stuff like that. I've basically replicated the run shortcuts extension, I realize, but I guess this model just works for me. At the same time, though, I also have individual shortcuts and I also have individual actions in my favorites. I got this is a nice mix, I guess, in Safari. So the top level item is extensions, which is my custom shortcut launcher. Then I have add to reading list, which is a system-wide extension for saving links to your Safari reading list. I got 1Password. I got copy, which is a Safari-specific action that copies the link of the current web page. And then I do have some individual shortcuts. I have upload image, which is my shortcut to upload images to our CDN. I got publish to WordPress, which for some reason is showing up in Safari, even though it's supposed to show up only when I'm sharing text. I guess this is a bug. And then I have my clip to iCloud clipboard, which is a shortcut that saves whatever I'm looking at in a custom text file in iCloud that I use as my iCloud Drive clipboard. So a nice combination of system-wide actions, app-specific actions, and shortcuts. What I don't like, and I'm just going to say this, I'm fine with the share sheet now. I used to be very critic of the original share sheet design earlier in the iOS 13 beta process. Right. I think it's gotten better, especially now that you have actual sections to separate all the actions. What I don't like is the lack of color and the fact that icons are on the opposite side of text labels. The lack of color means that everything at a glance sort of looks the same to me. There's no easy way for, to scan through and see different colors and associate them with different actions. And that is why in my share sheet, I'm using emoji next to some shortcuts to make them stand out visually. But the second problem I have is that I believe the icon, the glyph, the monochrome glyph, should be on the left side of the action's title, Because right now my eyes have to go left to right. I have to read the name of an action, and then I have to look at the glyph. Whereas I think it would be easier to visually, when you're scanning through the vertical list of actions, I think it would be easier to have the icon and the label right next to each other. So,
right.
Not a huge fan of this design, but it's also much better than what it used to be for the first few iOS 13 betas.
Well, I think part of the problem with that design is the fact that, I tend to try to keep my shortcut names as short as possible because otherwise they get truncated when you're in the Shortcuts app. But then when you go to the Share extension, you've got the icon on the right, so you have a lot of blank space between a lot of the names of the shortcuts,
right? Exactly,
and the glyph, which makes it even harder to track. Whereas if you had those glyphs on the left, they would be right next to the words, and it would be easier to kind of associate them together without losing what you're looking at.
But the thing you just mentioned of keeping short names is going to work against you in iOS 13, because now if you wanna use a shortcut with Siri, you can no longer assign a custom phrase to that shortcut.
Right.
Now you can just run a shortcut by saying its name to Siri, which means that if you like in iOS 12, it used to be possible, and I used to do this, to keep shortcuts with short names. So things like, I don't know, Apple frames, short descriptive names, but then use a longer, more sort of human readable sentence as the custom Siri phrase. That is no longer possible in iOS 13. So either when you're talking to Siri, you have to remember the short names of your shortcuts, which may not be necessarily conversation-like names,
right,
or you need to assign conversation-like names to your shortcuts. But then in your library, instead of seeing, I don't know, something like weather forecast, you will see get me the weather forecast as a shortcut title, which is not exactly, precise or clean as an approach.
Right, exactly.
I don't know.
That's interesting. So I've been, this is very much a work in process for me in terms of what I've got in these actions. But what I've been doing is trying to use this as an opportunity to only float to the top in the favorites those shortcuts and actions that I'm using a lot, that I find myself using every couple of days, that sort of thing. I want to keep that list relatively short. I mean, the benefit of that list, of course, is that they can be in any order that you want. You can drag these around and manually order them. And so my favorites right now are copy, because I'm doing this from Safari. It's different, obviously, in different places, but copy, because I'm always copying links. And then add to reading list, because like you, I've been using reading list. And then I have weekly links, because weekly links is the shortcut that you made that sends a URL to Trello and shows up for the links we're going to share in Club MacStories weekly newsletter. So that's there because I use that a lot. Save to Dropbox. I have no idea why a notable is in here. A notable is in here for when I'm annotating screenshots and photos. And then there's a series of additional MacStories related shortcuts. I've got sending apps to collections, which is the collections section of the newsletter. I've got apps and stickers.
That's not supposed to show up in Safari, though, John.
I know. I have no idea why these are showing. Pretend that I'm in the App Store now. Apps to collection.
Is this a new thing you're doing? Enabling shortcuts everywhere.
Hey! I did not build these shortcuts, Mister. These are your shortcuts. I did not alter them. Okay, I don't think. Maybe I did at some point. Let's see. Add to watch list. That's another one that should be in the App Store. That's our Slack bot that watches for updates to apps. Blink, another App Store one, which converts to an affiliate link, which I probably should take out of there since that's kind of gone and buried now. The whole affiliate linking thing. Opener is one that I use all the time to pick the app that I want a URL to open in. This gets used less in Safari, more in something like Tweetbot. For instance, if somebody tweets out a poll and I want to actually vote in the poll, I use it to open up the official Twitter app and then find on page, because sometimes I'm just doing research and I want to find something in the body of an article that I'm looking for. I really wish that I could take the other Safari actions and drop them to the bottom of the list and not have this Safari specific section here, because I don't add a lot of bookmarks regularly. I don't add a lot of favorites, and I never, ever, ever put anything on my home screen in terms of Safari web pages. So I wish those were not there, but they are, and it's fine. But that's kind of where I stand right now. I don't know if are there any photos ones that you would highlight that you're using these days?
Photos ones?
Yeah, I'm gonna look and see if I have any. You know what? Because the ones that I use there are I have a show image information one, and that one is an icon from an icon factory app called EXIF for seeing what the EXIF data is for a particular image. I don't use it a lot, but it's nice to have there. And then, of course, a notable, save to Dropbox, and save to files. Those are my main ones. And once in a while, I'll use copy photo too. But those are the ones that I keep at the top.
I have a couple I want to mention. The first one is called Pixel Picker. Now, this is an app that lets you extract a color with a color picker from an image. It's really not a great app. It's also kind of old and it looks ugly, but it does everything I need. And I haven't been able to find another iOS color picker that behaves exactly like this, gives me what I need, and it's not filled with ads or forces me to create an account, which I think is incredible for a color picker utility. So if anybody has any good color picker recommendations, and please make sure to check out Pixel Picker to understand my needs here. I just want to be able to, select a portion of an image and extract the color. That's all I need. Please send me those recommendations. I also have Combine Images, which is a custom shortcut that I've built to take whatever has been selected in the Photos app and combine those images in a single image and save that new image to the Photos library. And then I have a couple of variations of my upload image shortcut. One is called Upload Image PNG, that uses the PNG with transparency, doesn't convert to JPEG. What else? I have Upload Image Lossless, which is a way for us, and I don't do this often, but it's a way for me to upload a lossless version of an image without compression to our CDN. And then I have a handful of other extensions. I have Run Script, which is a scriptable extension to run JavaScript commands on images. And that's about it. I have no idea why I have import to Visco or inspect RSS feed show up in Photos. This is a shortcut I've built. It's not supposed to show up for Photos, so I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That shows up. Well, I mean, you've just got to probably adjust what it works with. I will give a shout out to the Mac here, because color pickers on the Mac are way better than on iOS, I think, in general. There are more of them, and maybe it's just partly an OS thing, but there's no shortage of interesting and innovative color pickers on the Mac, but it's a little thin at times on iOS. Or, iOS, they'll show up and then they'll be abandoned 6 months later. And I'm not going to say that's unique to iOS, though, because there are plenty of color pickers I've tried over the years on the Mac that aren't around and developed anymore either. I think it's one of those things that ends up being someone's first project and then they move on to bigger and better things. Okay, Federico, that's a good discussion. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves, because I do think that the share sheet is different enough going into iOS 13 that it does require a little bit of rethinking of exactly what you have in these favorites. And I really feel like I've only spent, the last 3 or 4 weeks that the share sheet has stabilized a little more, figuring out exactly what I want in those sections. And I expect it's going to change quite a bit more. And more than anything, there's a lot of things in there still that need to be deleted or toggled off, because my favorite section is relatively limited, and I don't think it's going to get much longer. And as a result, I think I want the rest of those suggestions to just kind of go away for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our 3 sponsors again for this week. That's Genius Scan, Backblaze, and Monday.com. Also, go over and check out Club MacStories if you haven't before. It's club.macstories.net. And you can, of course, find me and Federico writing both over at macstories.net and the club. And you can find Federico on Instagram and Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.